high school, I purposely scored low on exams and paid the popular guy to tutor me, even though he resented me for taking up the time he wanted to spend with his first love. When he discovered that my college entrance score was 100 points higher than his, he still cursed me, thinking I was just a fake rich girl who was malicious and would never experience true love. Eventually, he killed me, and even then, didn't miss the chance to visit my grave and warn me not to pity him in a hypocritical way or force a relationship in another life. In my second chance at life, I didn't ask him to tutor me again, giving him more time to work as a waiter in various restaurants with his childhood sweetheart. Kevin sighed with regret. He had lost his father in a fire 3 years ago. A fire his father was fighting near our family's chain of catering stores. Out of gratitude, our family donated 1 million yuan to his family. But his mother, heartbroken, fell ill and was hospitalized. By the time Kevin and I entered the same public high school, his family had already spent most of the subsidies and donations they had received. When my mother heard we were in the same class, she wanted to donate another 1 million yuan. But Kevin coldly refused, saying, "Don't insult me." So I came up with another plan. I deliberately ranked at the bottom of the new student entrance exam and paid Kevin a high fee to tutor me, making it seem like I was helping his self-esteem while also giving him more time to care for his mother and study. But in my previous life, he resented me for this. He thought I had taken the time he could have spent with his childhood sweetheart June, who eventually fell in love with another guy, because I kept him tutoring me. He also believed I humiliated him by scoring 100 points higher in the college entrance exam, thinking that a poor student like him should have done better and that I was only pursuing him out of arrogance. He said he would never love me and cursed me, saying I was a scheming rich girl who would never find true love. Later, he worked hard, got into a better school, and in his third year received angel investment to start an aesthetic medicine company. His good looks helped his business, and he soon earned 10 million yuan. Kevin eventually built up the courage to find June, only to discover she was already pregnant with twins from a wealthy businessman 10 years older than her. Compared to this businessman's wealth, Kevin's money seemed insignificant. Enraged, he targeted me and invited me to his clinic under the pretense of an aesthetic medicine procedure, where he secretly poisoned me. He then covered up my death by claiming it was a simple medical accident. My parents initially sought justice, but when they learned the incident occurred at Kevin's company, they dropped it out of respect for his father, a heroic firefighter. They even allowed Kevin to help with my funeral, after which he convinced them to invest more money in his business. At my grave, Kevin sneered and told me if I had another life, I shouldn't pretend to be a saint or pity him. He said he didn't need my family's money, and tutoring me was something he despised. He declared that my arrogance led to my death, and that he felt no guilt. Perhaps, seeing the injustice, God gave me a second chance at life. This time, I would neither hide my strengths nor sacrifice myself for him. I wouldn't allow him to take any money from my family or hurt me ever again. Holding my report card that placed me at the bottom of the sophomore high school test, I walked home quickly. Seeing my much younger-looking parents made it feel like I had traveled back in time. My mother took my report card, handed me an orange slice, and said, "Our Wendy is back. Eat more vitamin C to stay healthy. Don't forget, you were the top scorer in the high school entrance exam. Don't get too lost in pretending to be a bad student." With tears in my eyes, I replied, "From today, don't ask Kevin to tutor me anymore. In the next exam, I won't score at the bottom either. Also, Tell the store managers at our restaurants not to hire Kevin if he applies for a job. My mother looked surprised and exchanged a glance with my father. In my previous life, my parents were initially supportive of me, deliberately scoring low to help Kevin, but they were embarrassed that their daughter, the city's top scorer, had become a poor student. For 2 years, people gossiped that I had cheated in the entrance exam, and that our family, being so business-minded, wasn't interested in academics. Rumors also spread that having Kevin tutor me was just a scheme to take advantage of his top 10 ranking and improve our family's genes. But my family, wanting to help the son of a hero, endured the gossip. I was committed to the act, even developing feelings for Kevin. As a teenager, it wasn't surprising that I liked his good looks and admired him as the son of a heroic firefighter. I had also read too many romance novels about powerful men, so I became infatuated with him. My mother often reminded me of the promise I made to confess my feelings only after the college entrance exam. I held back my tears and said firmly, "I'm serious. I'll go study by myself now." Just as I finished, the doorbell rang, and Aunt Shu, our nanny, let Kevin in. Seeing his 18-year-old face made me feel sick, but I forced a sarcastic smile and said, "It must be hard to tutor a rich girl like me. You can leave now, but I'll still pay you for today. If you don't want handouts, feel free to refuse. Starting tomorrow, you don't need to come back. We may be wealthy, but we won't offer kindness to those who don't appreciate it." That night, I had a nightmare, reliving the pain of the poison spreading through my body. I woke up screaming, covered in cold sweat. My mother rushed into my room, comforting me, saying, "It's just a dream, Wendy. Don't worry. We're here to protect you." I looked at her, full of concern, and hugged her. And, "Mom," I whispered, "please make sure no restaurant we work with hires Kevin, not even for washing dishes." My mother, puzzled, asked, "Wendy, why has your attitude toward Kevin changed so suddenly? Yesterday, when he left, he looked upset. Did something happen between you two?" I couldn't tell her I had been reborn. That would have scared her. Kevin had made it clear time and again that he wasn't interested in taking money from my family. When my mother wanted to donate 1 million yuan to help his family, he coldly turned it down. This was the reality, and my mother understood my point of view. However, she mentioned that if the restaurants working with our family's chain didn't employ Kevin, he might go to work for the rival Yao's restaurant, which had poor reviews but was still thriving. I nodded, confirming that this was exactly what I intended. After being reborn, I set a goal to take revenge and relieve my frustration. First, I wanted Kevin to understand his true value. Second, I wanted him to suffer unbearable pain. And lastly, I aimed to watch him meet a miserable end. As expected, a week later, Kevin took a part-time job at Yao's restaurant. Initially, he didn't mind that the places he had worked previously wouldn't rehire him, since June no longer worked at those restaurants either. Kevin followed June to Yao's, even though the hourly wage there was much lower than other places. What mattered most to him was being with June. Every day after school, Kevin would meet June at the crosswalk near the school, and they would hold hands, share a snack, and take the bus to their jobs, washing dishes and waiting tables. Kevin's mother's medical bills were originally covered by the high fee we paid him for tutoring, which was 5 times more than what famous teachers charged. However, the cost of hospitalization quickly drained the money in less than a month. With an hourly wage of 15.3 yuan from his part-time job, Kevin worked as much as he could, 90 hours per month. but his total earnings of 1,377.1 wen were paid the following month and were nowhere near enough to cover his mother's hospital expenses. Desperate, Kevin begged the hospital for a week's extension on the payment and promised to find a way to make up the difference. His solution was to work extra shifts as a waiter, even if it meant skipping classes to do so. Kevin's teacher soon noticed something was wrong and privately called him into the office to offer help. When asked about his situation, Kevin admitted his family was struggling financially and his mother urgently needed funds for medical bills. The teacher, sympathetic and impressed by Kevin's academic standing in the top 10 of the grade, decided to help. First, the teacher donated a small sum of money to Kevin and then promised to organize a class-wide effort to raise funds. Although Kevin seemed hesitant, he couldn't refuse the help in the end. During a self-study period, the donation QR code was passed to the front of the class, where my desk mate, Cher, generously scanned it and transferred 100 wen, saying she had already reached her limit after donating a total of 200 wen to Kevin, which was her breakfast money for a month, plus her milk tea money. She jokingly told me not to laugh at her for donating less than I might. Without looking up from my work, I calmly replied that I wouldn't donate at all. Cher was shocked and exclaimed that since I had previously paid Kevin a high fee for tutoring, he was practically my teacher. Besides, my family was wealthy and kind, much like the wealthy characters from the movie Parasite, who had the luxury of showing kindness because of their resources. Realizing what she had said, Cher apologized for guilt-tripping me and explained that she'd noticed I hadn't been acting like myself recently. I finally put down my pen, passed the donation code to the next desk, and told her that being too kind could lead to being taken advantage of. If I gave money to Kevin, he might end up resenting wealthy people like me even more. Cher burst out laughing, and I leaned in to whisper that I was looking out for my own safety first. I then reminded her that 2 years ago, my mother had tried to donate 1 million won to Kevin's family, but he refused, feeling it was an insult to his pride. I had foolishly assumed I was helping him, without considering whether he wanted or needed the help. After that, I decided to stop being overly generous. I resumed working on my test, and Cher had no choice but to sit in silence, sipping her milk tea and pondering for a while. In our second class meeting, the homeroom teacher announced that the donations for Kevin had totaled 10,498 yuan. Clearing his throat, he sarcastically pointed out that most of the class had donated to help Kevin, subtly criticizing those who hadn't. I could feel Kevin's cold stare from the front row, but I didn't respond. As the bell rang, signaling the end of class, I packed my things and went home, where I enjoyed a nutritious dinner, read for a bit, then showered and went to bed. I needed rest for the upcoming final exams. Knowing a good night's sleep would help me think clearly and perform well. A week later, the exam results were out, and I had jumped from the bottom of the rankings to the top 30 in the grade and the top 5 in the class. Meanwhile, Kevin, who had been in the top 10 for the past 2 years, dropped to the 100th spot. My classmates were buzzing with gossip. Some doubted my achievement, speculating that I might have cheated or traded exam papers with Kevin. Others pointed out that I had been the top scorer in the city's high school entrance exam, which made my recent success more plausible. But rumors persisted that my previous scores had been bought through connections. Some suggested my final exam results should be reviewed, or that I should take another test to prove myself. Fortunately, Cher spoke up in my defense, explaining that she had seen me practicing test papers every day for the past 2 months. The homeroom teacher, still bitter that I hadn't donated to Kevin, called me into his office. He bluntly asked if I had cheated, and when I denied it, he pressed for proof. He questioned how my score could be so much higher than Kevin's, given that he had been my tutor. He even suggested I had bought Kevin's answers. Laughing, I told him that the burden of proof lay with the accuser. I also reminded him that my parents had started their business from the ground up, working hard for over 10 years to build what we had. I sarcastically suggested he start his own business if he thought it was so easy. I explained that wealthy people aren't idiots. They use their resources and knowledge to accumulate wealth, and in doing so, contribute to society by paying taxes and creating jobs. I also pointed out that 2 years ago, my family had donated a significant amount to the school's education fund, which had benefited him as well. The teacher was left speechless and stammered that I was rude and disrespectful. I laughed again, realizing there was no point in continuing the conversation. As I left his office, I told him that respect should be mutual and that he shouldn't use his authority to bully others. After I went back to the classroom, Kevin came up to my desk and asked if I could step outside to speak with him. This was the first time he had initiated a conversation with me since I had been reborn, but his face still carried the same disdainful look. I recalled the moment from my past life when he injected venom into my body, which made me tremble with an anger. I fought back the wave of hatred that surged within me, glared at him with disdain, and told him to speak here if he had something to say. After a moment, he spat out some nonsense about how his mother wanted to see me and that she had asked him to request my presence at the hospital. He emphasized, "My mother wants to see you, but that doesn't mean I accept you. There's no chance between us, and stop playing hard to get." What rubbish! I immediately stood up and slapped him, saying, "You're a grown man. Can you stop making baseless accusations? What game of hard to get am I playing? I stopped paying you to tutor me because I can achieve higher scores without you. Why should I waste money on your ugly face? Have I ever pursued you, confessed my love, or sent you a love letter? No, none of that happened. You were tutoring me for a while, that's all. Don't be so self-important." I then added, "Also, Kevin, make it clear that it's you who is asking me for a favor now. So show the proper attitude when requesting help, and don't destroy the good reputation your parents have earned." Kevin, having been slapped and scolded, blushed, first looking at me in disbelief before shouting back angrily, "Whether you go or not, it's your choice." I've delivered the message. I'm going to earn my living now. I watched as he stormed off, shouting after him, "What a hypocrite! What a jerk!" Sherry, who had been sipping milk tea beside me, took my hand and said, "Wendy, don't get mad. It's bad for your health." I replied, "Not scolding that jerk would be worse for my health." But knowing she was just trying to comfort me, I nodded and said I'd treat her to hot pot to celebrate our exam success. Sherry had improved from the top 50 to the top 30 in the grade, and she was now among the top 10 in our class. Sherry immediately put down her milk tea, packed her school bag, and dragged me out of the classroom amid the whispers of our curious classmates. We left the school, carefree, and headed to a fragrant hot pot restaurant. There, we indulged ourselves, eating beef slices, tripe, lotus roots, potatoes, bamboo shoots, and beef balls we hadn't had in a while. A week later, when my mother took me to the city hospital for a checkup, we ran into Kevin, who was picking up his mother to be discharged. It wasn't because she had recovered, but rather that her condition had worsened. Her central nervous system was damaged, and she now had chronic hemiplegia from a previous cerebral hemorrhage. Even if she stayed in the hospital, she would still need a caregiver for her daily needs and rehabilitation. The first crowdfunding campaign Kevin's family launched had covered the old debts, but the money ran out in less than 2 weeks. Their second attempt at crowdfunding saw fewer donations. People's goodwill only lasts so long. When Kevin's mother saw us, she greeted us weakly and thanked us for the donations and care we had previously given to Kevin. She explained she had wanted to invite me to the hospital to thank me in person. Feeling a twinge of compassion, I couldn't understand how such a reasonable woman had raised someone as arrogant as Kevin. She then said, "My son doesn't want to ask for money everywhere to treat my illness anymore. I understand him. Men care about their pride. I'll go home, use a wheelchair, and exercise on my own. When Kevin comes back from school or work, he can help me exercise. I should improve gradually." My mother and I exchanged glances, respecting her wishes, and wished her well. Kevin, standing by, rudely shoved us aside with his bandaged hand and then pushed his mother toward the bus. The cold wind blew as I thought, "Is this guy losing it? He seems to be taking out his frustrations on me. I should be the one with a right to be angry. I only showed him his true worth. I haven't even started making things difficult for him yet." Later, I called the restaurant manager to hear what information my family had gathered from Yaji restaurant. Kevin had been struggling there lately. First, he hadn't received his part-time pay on time because he accidentally broke a few plates. The stingy restaurant demanded compensation for the plates, tripling their cost, even though they weren't worth much. Kevin couldn't even replace them with cheaper ones, as the restaurant claimed they were custom-made. Humiliated, Kevin wanted to return to his old job, but his former co-worker, Jun, refused to join him, as she found the work exhausting. On top of that, the restaurant where she worked had recently been exposed for serving pre-made dishes. To counter the scandal, the boss came up with a plan. They set up a glass display at the entrance, pretending to cook their signature dish, stir-fried pork with peppers. Jun, being attractive, was chosen to cut the peppers in the window. It was an easy job for her, so she wasn't keen on going back to her old workplace with Kevin. Kevin, feeling the weight of his humiliation, visited several restaurants he had worked at before, but they all turned him down. The managers told him they had been instructed by Wendy's family's restaurants not to let him earn a single penny from them, even through hard labor. Kevin, frustrated, returned to Yaji restaurant, washing dishes, scrubbing tables, and taking night shifts just to make ends meet. At Yaji restaurant, full-time and part-time employees alike were treated as nothing more than laborers. If you were willing to work, you stayed. If not, you left. Wendy's family and Yao's family had monopolized the catering market in the area, leaving Kevin with few options. Finally, understanding how hard it was to earn a living, Kevin spent more time working, even though his mother had been discharged, and they still needed money for daily expenses. The community occasionally provided assistance, but Kevin was stubborn, accepting it at times and refusing it at others, all to prove to Jun that he could be relied on. Unfortunately for him, Jun only responded with helpless looks as she continued cutting peppers in the glass display case. 8 months passed like this, and we were now entering the final stages of preparing for the college entrance exam. My grades had consistently placed me in the top 3 of the class and the top 10 of the grade, while Kevin had fallen to last place in both. The head teacher, who had once favored Kevin, was in disbelief, struggling to accept that his once promising student was now at the bottom. In his mind, high school was a time when boys excelled, and the top scorers from the past few years had all been male. But whether the top scorer was male or female didn't matter. They all had to study, review, do exercises, and take exams. Over the past 8 months, Kevin had skipped nearly 200 classes and missed more than 100 mock exams. Due to spending significantly less time and effort on his studies, it was no surprise that Kevin always ranked near the bottom of the class. The head teacher often felt pity for him and even suggested that Kevin should repeat a year. However, Kevin rejected the idea and calmly explained that his mother had fallen while doing her rehabilitation exercises alone at home the previous month. By the time he returned from his night shift, he found that she had passed away. From that moment, he was able to focus more on himself and his studies. The head teacher looked at Kevin's face, now gaunt with sunken eyes and acne, and felt deeply saddened. He encouraged Kevin to do his best in the final stretch before the college entrance exams, urging him to make a last-minute push. Kevin nodded firmly, his expression one of fierce determination, as if he could conquer any challenge that came his way. Unfortunately, after the college entrance exam results were released, both Kevin and the head teacher had to face the harsh reality. My score was 300 points higher than Kevin's, and Sherry and I, as we had hoped while eating hot pot, ranked in the top 3 of our grade. Sherry and I each achieved the highest marks in the city in Chinese and mathematics. Another girl earned the highest overall score. We applied to top universities in China, while Kevin's score only allowed him to apply to a local junior college. He ended up working in the same restaurant with his childhood friend, June, washing dishes and attending the junior college together. After they graduated, they could have sold roasted sweet potatoes on the street, if June was willing. But clearly she wasn't. After receiving her acceptance letter from the junior college, she decided to work in Hong Kong instead. Claiming that studying was pointless for girls, she believed it was better to become a young model while she still had time, earn money, and attend socialite training courses. Dreaming of marrying an 8th-tier celebrity like Evan. Kevin, however, was now beneath her. In the past, he used the tutoring fees my family provided to buy her luxury gifts, but she rejected him because he couldn't spend enough time with her. She instead fell for the school bully. In this life, even though Kevin had more time to be with her, washing dishes together, sharing meals, even splitting a corn cob, she no longer believed love could make up for hardships. She felt Kevin had no money to offer and didn't want a life of struggle with no end in sight. She wanted both material comfort and emotional fulfillment. But Kevin, in both this life and the previous one, couldn't provide either. She laughed at him, calling him a stupid, ugly fool. Soon, this fool was arrested by the police. Kevin's arrest stemmed from a neighbor reporting that he had killed his mother 3 months prior. After Kevin returned home, he first fed his bedridden mother millet porridge, and once she was resting, he smothered her with a pillow. Though she struggled and pleaded for her life, Kevin coldly ignored her. He didn't release the pillow until she had stopped breathing. An hour later, he staged the scene, making it appear as though she had fallen from her wheelchair. Porridge spilled around her before rushing off to work his night shift. The next morning, upon confirming that her body had stiffened, Kevin called emergency services. When the ambulance arrived and confirmed his mother's death, they informed him that it was not within their responsibility, advising him to call the funeral home instead. This allowed Kevin to avoid an autopsy of his mother's body. Given the poverty he and his mother lived in, and her long-term illness, it wasn't unusual for people to assume she had died from a fall. But I hadn't forgotten about Kevin. Since being reborn, I'd always planned to take revenge. I simply allowed him to reveal his true nature. Killing his mother was his decision. All I did was have people monitor him, become his neighbors, and gather video evidence of his crime. In this life, Kevin wouldn't even be able to attend the junior college he once looked down upon. Though he claimed to scorn wealthy families like mine, he shamelessly accepted the benefits and money we provided. After his father died, he used the funds to give his mother the best care and managed to get into a prestigious university. Yet, he still resented me, blaming me for delaying his romantic endeavors. It's laughable. He could have rejected the help we offered, but he didn't. After murdering me in the previous life, Kevin went to various universities, eventually finding a girl who resembled June and pursuing her as a replacement for his lost love. Fate seems to favor those who are selfish and shameless. Even after I died, Kevin continued to experience success in love and wealth, while good people, whether rich or poor, healthy or sick, were always taken advantage of. So friends, don't be too kind-hearted. The saying, "the kind are always bullied," may be old, but it's true. In this new life, I refuse to play the saint. I'm just getting started with my revenge on Kevin, ensuring he'll regret ever crossing me. In September, while Sherry and I were attending university in Beijing, joining clubs, competing in debates, Kevin was imprisoned and put on public trial. Though he had confessed earlier, during the trial, he retracted his statement, unable to accept a life sentence. He sobbed and denied his guilt, claiming the video evidence provided by the neighbor was doctored to frame him. He also alleged he was tortured into confessing. He tried to exonerate himself by pointing out inconsistencies, even using the excuse that he had once watched a movie where a caretaker smothered a patient with a pillow, but couldn't bring himself to do the same. He insisted that despite his many part-time jobs, he only wanted the best for his mother and couldn't have possibly killed her. Though he admitted he wasn't an exceptional person, he claimed to be kind, so kind that he couldn't even harm a chicken. When his mother died, he did feel a sense of relief, because he was exhausted. He argued that his mother must have felt relief too, as she was now free to join his father in death. Since his mother's body had long been cremated, and without a confession, the case lacked solid evidence. The trial had to be suspended for further review. Meanwhile, the case gained widespread attention online, with many recognizing Kevin's narcissistic and antisocial traits, likening him to another recent high-profile criminal. As someone who attended high school with Kevin, I couldn't help but pity the wasted potential of someone who was once a top student and school heartthrob. However, his unfortunate family circumstances were no excuse for murder. He had received plenty of support and donations after his father passed, but he ruined his own life. The real tragedy was his mother, not him. If Kevin's sentence remains unchanged after the second trial, the court may see his refusal to confess as a sign of poor attitude, which could lead to harsher punishment. Watching his downfall both for the internet's sake and my own satisfaction. I couldn't stand the idea of him getting away with his lies. So, I made sure Kevin would suffer. I arranged for someone to bribe a fellow prisoner, a man named Brother Wang to give Kevin a lesson in prison. In prison, inmates often ask each other why they are there, and crimes like rape, child abuse, and harming relatives are viewed with particular disdain. Kevin's fellow inmates already looked down on him for killing his mother, and his attempt to retract his confession only made it worse. Brother Wang, serving a life sentence for a crime he didn't commit, took out his frustration on Kevin. During exercise time, Kevin mysteriously found himself buried in the soil. At night, he was beaten black and blue. His food was stolen from him within minutes at every meal. This is only the beginning of what I have planned for Kevin. Kevin refilled his bowl, but it was taken from him again. Essentially, he was unable to have a complete meal. Initially, he would report this to the guards, but after doing so, he would just be beaten more severely. This cycle continued day after day. By the time of the second trial, he had endured 68 days of torture. As a result, during the second trial, his mental defenses broke down, and he finally confessed to killing his biological mother, providing all the details. He only asked that if sentenced to life imprisonment, he be transferred to another facility. The judge responded seriously, noting that Kevin had retracted his confession earlier, demonstrating a poor attitude towards acknowledging his guilt. Additionally, the extensive use of public resources had been wasted, and thus, the second trial's outcome might not necessarily result in a life sentence. Upon hearing this, Kevin was so shocked that he collapsed and fainted. In November, the first heavy snow of the season fell in Beijing. Sherry and I had planned to book tickets to the Forbidden City to take photos, but by the time we got our turn, all tickets were sold out due to high demand. So we enjoyed the snowfall and had Peking duck at the restaurant across from the Forbidden City. While we were halfway through our meal and sipping milk tea, we heard the outcome of Kevin's final trial. He was sentenced to death with a 2-year reprieve. Before I could voice my thoughts, Sherry angrily spoke up, questioning if the reprieve meant that Kevin wouldn't die. She doubted the death sentence would be carried out and speculated it might later be reduced to a life sentence. Many others were also furious. There were rumors that Kevin received this special treatment because his father was a fire hero, which led to his death sentence with a reprieve. But, as his mother's legal spouse, Kevin was a devil who had killed his own relatives. People voiced concerns about social safety, suggesting that if Kevin wasn't executed immediately, similar cases could occur in the future, putting people's lives at risk. Some expressed fear about the possibility of being killed by their own children, joking that they wouldn't know until it happened to them. One person humorously responded that they were more focused on protecting themselves and their own safety. Sherry, after finishing her milk tea, smiled and reassured me, saying, "It's all right. He'll die. I don't think even God could bear it anymore," implying that she believed Kevin's fate was sealed. Less than half a year later, Kevin committed the crime of intentional injury by attacking a fellow inmate, which met the legal requirements for immediate execution of a death sentence for someone under a reprieve. It wasn't clear whether Kevin did it, because he had had enough of the torture and provocation from other inmates, or because he was simply a person who enjoyed violence, as he had killed his own mother so callously before. In both this life and the previous one, Kevin was a terrible person. However, in this life, he deserved to die and face the consequences for his actions. During our last hot pot gathering that year, Sherry and I heard the news that Kevin had been executed. We were told that his death was gruesome. He had chosen the firing squad over lethal injection, but when they shot him, he tried to escape, resulting in multiple bullet wounds. Around the same time, we learned that a week before his execution, Kevin had requested a visit from June, offering her the old family home, hoping she could either live in it or sell it. He claimed it was a way of compensating her for not giving her the life she wanted 2 years earlier. It was typical of him to try and act romantic even in his final moments. But June had rejected his request and privately cursed him for being bad luck. By then, she had already made her way into a celebrity training program and was preparing to network with high-profile people. How could she possibly value a house owned by a murderer? We exchanged knowing glances, toasted with our milk tea, and celebrated. Sherry prayed, giving thanks for the safety we had experienced over the past year, and I followed with my own toast, expressing gratitude for my survival, the safety of my family, and for being able to retire early and enjoy life. I also thank the system for giving me the opportunity to be reborn, fulfilling all the tasks it had set for me. That night, just before New Year's Eve, I received a report from the system on my progress in this new life. It detailed how I had protected myself and my breast 789 times, avoided dangerous situations, sought medical help when necessary, and even successfully predicted and avoided Kevin's attempts to harm me. I had refused to give in to moral blackmail 57 times. From rejecting donations to Kevin to refusing to let others take advantage of me. I had done well in standing up for myself and others, and the system commended me for my actions. The report also acknowledged my actions to protect and help those in need, like rescuing stray animals and supporting the elderly. However, it reminded me that practicing kindness shouldn't involve overstepping into others' lives or trying to save everyone. Excessive interference could end up causing harm to myself and others. The report concluded with a reminder to continue being passionate, as my actions had set an example for future years. In a way, I had learned how to balance kindness with vigilance, ensuring I wouldn't let myself be taken advantage of.